Very good evening to all the learners. Let us welcome Dr. Chong Shimray, Associate Professor, Department of Science and Mathematics, Department of Science and Mathematics, National Council of Education Research Training, NCERT, New Delhi. As you know, from the last few sessions, we are talking about different views on the concept of sustainability and different approaches. And in few of the sessions, most of you are very enthusiastic about what is the ground level status of environment and education, whether sustainability education has to go with environment education or not. So keeping all this in our mind, we thought that not only having bookish knowledge, it is better to invite a few scholars, academics who are really working in this field and practice about environment education across India. So in this session, we are going to talk, have the session on environment education in India. Dr. Chong Shimray, she is Associate Professor at NCERT, New Delhi. She is a Fulbright Fellow. She has traveled to US under this fellowship twice after attending this NCERT. This closely involved in implementing environment education across India and regularly traveling length and the breadth of our country. So now let us welcome her with these details about her her qualification. Others I have already shared to all of you through our discussion forum. So with this, let us welcome Dr. Chong Shimray in this session. Welcome you, madam. I on behalf of the university and the learners. So please share your experience with our learners so that all will, enthusiasts, they will get something out of that. And giving the session to you now.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity. I take it as an honor to be part of this program, to be associated in some way with this program. Being very passionate about this field called environmental education, which is not so popular, so to say, although all of us talk about environment. But as a subject or as a discipline or as a concern in the education system, this is something that we have not really been serious about it. And so, but I've been very passionate about it. And so it's such an honor, I feel, that I'll be able to share some of my experiences in this field. So it's like, it's more than 10 years, around 12 years that I've been working in this field. So I will be just sharing some of my experiences. Of course, it's not just going to be field experience, it's also going to include some of those concerns related to theoretical knowledge, I would say, because the term itself is not clear to many people. And so I thought, since you are taking this course, it might be helpful to you to understand what environmental education is, or so to say, what were our goals and objectives of studying environmental education, and have we achieved those goals? If we feel that we have achieved, then what more can we do? Or if we have not achieved those goals, then why could we not achieve, and what should be done, something related to that. And the presentation, as far as possible, I was asked to make a presentation for 50 minutes. I'll try not to go that far so that I can take more questions, and I will rather like to answer to your queries related to environmental education. But before we go into the discussion, I'll just share my presentation, which have already been shared with you all. So let's get started with that. So these are some of the topics that I'm going to cover. Why environmental education? Why do we even have to have environmental education? Then we have what is environmental education, how do you even define it, what are the goals and objectives, because unless you know the definition, what do you really mean by environmental education, you're not going to be able to frame your goals and objectives, and you're not going to be able to achieve those. And so it's very important to understand a little bit of that. Then what is the status, so what is happening few decades back, currently, and so that's what we're going to discuss about educational policies, some of the policy documents, which because policy documents guide the implementation. So it's important for us to touch upon that. So then based on the policy documents, for example, the national education policy, what does the national curriculum framework uh, talks about? So how does it implement? How does it go about? How does it, what does it recommend for environmental education? So a little bit of that. I'll touch upon some of my experiences in the US. So what's happening in the US schools. So that will be something I'll be adding upon. Now, of course, the challenges that I thought we are going through that. So I'll share some of those. I thought you might appreciate that. And yes, concerns of NEP, National Education Policy 2020. So what does this NEP talks about environmental education? So that those are some of the things that we're going to discuss. We're trying to cover in this 45 to 1 hour discussion. So let's get started. So why environmental education? Why are we even studying or are we even concerned about this field called environmental education? We all know about it. We don't even have to say anything about it. We know the ever increasing environmental degradation that we are facing day in and day out, and it's just going, getting worse and worse. And so that makes a valid reason, of course, to study environmental education. Environmental education is not just about the, pollution and about the degradation of the environment, but it is also related to environmental justice, the conflicts that it brings about, so the impact is drastic. And so that is also one of the reasons. There's so many other reasons also, but those are some of the reasons that you want to study environmental education. To prepare responsible citizens, ultimately what we want is that all citizens are environmentally aware, we're responsible, we take responsible decisions in our daily life. That's what we want to bring out in the students ultimately. But at the end, it's for our own existence. Our existence itself is questionable now. So how far human beings will exist if we keep on degrading our environment the way we are degrading right now? So it's all about survival. It's all about existence of human being. We talk about, oh, protect the environment. You are really not protecting the environment. You are taking, if you are doing that, you are doing it for yourself. So ultimately you are not conserving the environment for the sake of environment. You are doing it for yourself, for ourselves. So that message has to be really brought into the minds of the students, and that's one part of environmental education. So coming to what is environmental education? As I said in the beginning, it's very important to understand what do we even mean by environmental education. So how do we define that? So it's going to, everything else that we do after this, it's going to be impacted by the way we define it. So it's very important that we understand what do we even mean by environmental education. So this is one of those definitions, one of those oldest definitions, I would say. It was framed based on a conference that was held in Tbilisi. Rather, in Belgrade Charter, it was prepared, and ultimately it was accepted in the Tbilisi conference. So what it says, environmental education is a process aimed at developing a world population that is aware of and concerned about the total environment and its associated problems, and which has a knowledge, motivation, commitments, and skills to work individually and collectively towards solutions of current problems and the prevention of new ones. If you can always go back to this presentation and try to understand what all it covers. If you unpack this, if you open up this definition, it pretty much covers everything. So I will not really delve into the details of every word, but the catchwords are like, we want to bring about a world population that is aware of and concerned about the environment, not just know about the environment, but how do we make somebody be concerned about the environment. So that's very important. Of course, knowledge is very important. You need to have knowledge about how environment even functions, how your climate functions, how your air is polluted, how your ecosystem works, and all those things are very important. But besides that, it's also important to be motivated, to motivate people to take actions. How committed we are. Commitment is so important. Without commitment, knowledge is meaningless. And skills. You might know so many things. You might know so many facts. You might score 100 out of 100 theoretically. But if you really do not have the skills to take care of the environmental problems, identify the environmental issues, or how to solve those problems, unless you have those skills, you're not going to be able to do anything about the environment. And so skill is also one of those aspects that's very important that we want to inculcate in the students. And collectively works towards solution of the current problems and prevention of new ones. Collectively is also another word that is very important, because individually it might not be enough. The way with that we have deteriorated the environment, degraded the environment. So we need to really work collectively. We need to somehow come together, decide collective decisions. Sometimes we might have to compromise, so collective decision is very important. Collective working together collectively is so important if you really want to solve environmental problems. Individually, of course, we can do at our level, but collective solutions are very important. So that we can solve the current problems and prevent the new ones that might come. And so when we say the new ones, you can come back to your definition of sustainable development, meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future, for the and future generation to meet their own needs. So you want to prevent future problems also by solving the current ones at the same time. So that's the definition of environmental education. So if you really are going to follow this in the spirit and letter, then you will never have any kind of environmental problem. But since we are not doing any of this, maybe some knowledge aspect we have been focusing on, but rest of it has not been our focus, and maybe that's one of the reasons that the deterioration or the degradation is increasing day by day. I thought that it will be important for you all to understand how did even this field called environmental education come into being, So this is common. I'm sure you might be aware about this United Nations Conference on the Human Environment, which was held in Stockholm from 5th June to 16th June. And that's the reason that we are observing this World Environment Day on 5th June, So that's one of the biggest, foremost conference that was held related to environment, where leaders from different nations participated in that. Even our Prime Minister, the then Prime Minister, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, was also one of those attendees, dignitaries who attended this conference, and based on which India took so many decisions after having attended this meeting, this conference. Then following this conference, there was a 10-day workshop on environmental education that was held in Belgrade. So that was in 1975. So it culminated in something called the Belgrade Charter, where the definitions, the goals, objectives, and everything related to environmental education was discussed. And the definition that I just showed you was framed at during this workshop that was held. Then eventually 2 years after that, the Belgrade Charter. So there was this intergovernmental conference on environmental education organized by UNESCO and UNEP in Tbilisi, in Georgia, in 1977. So this is the foremost internationally known conference on environmental education that was held. During this meeting, all the goals, I'll show you the goals and the objectives of environmental education were framed. So what were those goals which was decided during the Tbilisi conference was, it includes to foster clear awareness of and concern about economic, social, political, ecological, interdependence in urban and rural areas. I'm highlighting the word interdependence because when somebody says environmental education, then people assume that it's only about plants and animals or air and water. But if you look at this point, you can see the interdependence. The word interdependence connect everything else: economic, social, political, ecological interdependence. So when you say environmental education, it's not just about the biotic and abiotic factors that's there, but the social aspects, economic aspects, political aspects, it's all incorporated in that. So the definition is, I mean, this point is more holistic than what we assume environmental education to be. To provide every person with opportunities to acquire the knowledge, values, attitudes, commitment, and skills needed to protect and improve the environment. As I said, knowledge alone is not sufficient. You need to have the right attitude, the commitment to work, the skills, the right skills to take action. So that is also another very important aspect. To create new patterns of behavior of individual groups and society as a whole toward the environment. I have highlighted this word behavior because although ultimately what we want is a behavioral change in the citizens, in the people, in their livelihood, in their daily life. So a behavior in which, in such a way that they will be able to do the right thing for the environment. So that's something that we are aspiring, that we are expecting students to be ultimately after studying environmental education. But it is not possible to change behavior just like that, because behavior, changing somebody's behavior, it has to be almost lifelong. It takes years and decades to get into that. And so this what is being debated amongst the environmental educators, saying that you cannot focus on behavior because behavior is a result of that you do something. So more you give experiences of taking care of the environment, doing the right decisions about the environment, ultimately the behavior will change. So that is something that is being debated. I'm not going to get into that. But what I'm trying to say is that ultimately what we want is that citizens who are able to behave in such a way that it is environmentally friendly. So that's what I'm trying to say. What are the goals based on objectives based on those goals? So let me just bring you down all the points. I'm not going to get into every point again. I'll just highlight awareness. Awareness is very important. You need to be sensitive about the issues that's happening around you. You need to have the right knowledge. Knowledge can be about anything, again, not just the scientific knowledge, about the social skills, all those knowledge, again, it's included in that. You also need to have the right attitude. Feelings, how do you make somebody feel right about it? You might know so many things, but you might not have the attitude or the feeling to be concerned about the environment. So what do you do so that students start having the feeling or having the right attitude towards the environment? So that's something that we want to achieve through environmental education. So then the skills, development of skills among the students. How do you provide skills? What kind of skills are you supposed to be providing? Skills, identification of the issues, how to solve the problems, how to negotiate, and all those skills. Participation is something, again, very important during the school life, even during the college life, of course. Even, of course, it's not just about formal education, it's about informal, during your daily life, in a community. How do you participate in taking care of environment? How can you help? How can you be involved? So are we providing enough opportunity to students to participate in taking action related to environmental problems? So that is something that we want to focus in environmental education. So those are the broad objectives of environmental education. So coming based on that, so let's come to India now. So far it was a more general idea about what environmental education is and what the goals and objectives are. So we are all aware about what the Constitution says about environment. There are several clauses where it talks about environment. Then there are also, national education policies, as I said, it talks about environment in so many different ways. Of course, sometimes it focuses more, sometimes a little bit less. So it all depends on the policy documents and other committee reports that we come out with from time to time. So if we look at some of the points that are highlighted in the Constitution, which I'm sure you must be familiar with all these points. So you have this clause in the Article 48A, 51A. I'm not going to say what does it even say. I'm not going to get into that just to save time. So there's a lot mentioned in the, in our Constitution itself. That's what I'm trying to just show you. What about National Policy on Education 1986, which we came up? That was a second education policy. So what did it say about environment? So it says There is a paramount need to create a consciousness of the environment. It must permeate all ages and all sections of the society, beginning with the child. Environmental consciousness should inform teaching in schools and colleges. These aspects will be integrated in the entire educational process. So entire word is very important here. So although this is just one para that is mentioned in the education policy, those it's not a very big, I mean thick or many page document. In that small document, this para was mentioned, and it strongly highlights what we need to be doing about environment, or how environmental education should be taught. It says that it should be throughout the entire educational process. That means in schools, college, and everywhere else. So that's something it says. And it also says that the national system of education will be designed to promote protection of the environment. So these are 2 points which strongly focus on environment. So this is about this policy document of 1986. So based on this national policy on education which was prepared in 1986, based on that, subsequently NCERT, as you all know, we come out with the curriculum frameworks, meaning what is to be taught, how it is to be taught, and all those guiding. It guides different states and different people who are working in this field of education, how education should happen. So based on the education policy of 1986, NCERT came up with new curriculum frameworks, one in 1988 and one in 2000. So in all those two curriculum frameworks, the importance of environmental education were reiterated. Again, something very unique about India. I'm sure, again, you must have heard, or you must be very conversant with this judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court of India. So this was in response to the writ petition filed by Shri MC Mehta. I'm sure you all are familiar with this name, because he has filed so many cases. He has been working on the Taj Mahal thing, air pollution in the Taj Mahal area. So he's one of those person who has been filing, cases related to environment in different ways. So one of the things that he did was in 1991, when he filed this petition in the Supreme Court, saying that the environment is not being taken care enough. And so he also gave a whole list of suggestions that this needs to be done in schools, this needs to be done in public places, and all those things. So he gave a list of things, suggestions, or so to say, views about environment, how it needs to be taken care. So based on his writ petition, the Honorable Supreme Court came up with this direction, or an order, saying that we accept on principle that through the medium of education, awareness of the environment and its problems related to pollution should be taught as a compulsory subject. So this is a strongly worded judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court, which if we don't follow, then it's going to be a contempt of court. And that is the reason that, if you're aware, if you're not aware, I don't know, that is the reason that you have this course, even in the college level, you have this environmental studies course. So we'll be talking about that a little later. But for now, so this judgment was so important because it changed so many things at so many different levels. So besides this point that I'm focusing, it's just about education. Otherwise, there were several other points. For example, I don't know if you have grown up some 30 years back, then you might have seen during movies, during the breaks, you might see some advertisements related to air pollution and things like that, So that was because of the judgment of this in this order itself. So it was a long judgment saying that, okay, public places should do this, schools should do this, education system should do this, and all kinds of suggestions were, directions were given by the Honorable Supreme Court. So what I'm trying to say is that here, what's important is that India is probably the only country in the whole world, entire world, where environmental education is mandated by the Supreme Court. So there's something very unique, and that makes it, this inner advantage, I would say that, because we have this Honorable Supreme Court judgment, which is, if we don't do it, it's going to be a contempt of court. That means that we have to do it. So I feel that it's a good judgment. It's good for all of us, because now that we have to do it, like it or not. So that is something that has come out of that order. So that is to be appreciated. Uh, as I said, I'll not go into that. Okay. So so far, so that was a judgment. So we have had the curriculum frameworks talking about environmental education. We had the national education policies talking about the environment, and we also have the Honorable Supreme Court's judgment, which makes environmental education suggests directed that environmental education should be a compulsory subject. It did not use the word environmental education for as you see in that, you know. So if you see in that statement, nowhere it's written that environmental education should be made a compulsory subject. But since MC Mehta's case was filed based on, because he had emphasized on pollution, you know, so the judgment also came out based on pollution. But then ultimately, it was agreed that environmental education should be taught as a compulsory subject. So that's how it was taken. This judgment was taken. So then, so far, all of this have happened. Now, how to teach environmental education? Now, you know, Honorable Supreme Court has said that it should be taught as a compulsory subject. That means that you need to have a separate subject. But is that the most feasible way, or the most appropriate way, or most you know, effective way of going about? So that is a big question, because how you teach is going to decide. I mean, it's going to impact how you, I mean, what happens to the students, to the learners. So as a separate subject, as directed by an Honorable Supreme Court, or are you going to teach through different subject disciplines? So these are the two options that we had. The Honorable Supreme Court's direction was to teach as a separate subject, but there are some other issues. For example, this Yashpal committee report that came up was called Learning Without Burden. So what did it find? It found that we need to reduce the curriculum load. That means not what students are studying in terms of concepts and content. And also we need to reduce the physical load. So this report was a very strong report again. So if you look into this, then it a little bit contradicts what the Honorable Supreme Court said. So now you want to reduce this curriculum load, but now if you have another additional subject, then how does that work, you know? So then it becomes a little bit difficult for educators to decide what is the best way to go about. So then following that 1991 judgment, different states implemented environmental education the way they thought was best. There was no uniform way of implementing that. So every state was doing in different ways. So ultimately, what the Supreme Court said was, it asked NCERT to come up with a module syllabus, a model syllabus. And it also made a model syllabus for classes 11 to 12. It also made NCERT the nodal agency. That means that if something is happening good in the school system on environmental education, then NCERT has done it. If things have failed, then we should be pretty much responsible for it, because we have been made the nodal agency to look into its implementation and supervise. If things are not working, we are supposed to be supervising how we can make things better, you know. So that was another order of the Honorable Supreme Court. Ultimately, NCERT came up with a syllabus, which we call environmental education in schools. That was in 2005. Actually, it was printed in 2004. So this was a syllabus which tells what is to be taught from class 1 to 12, you know. So that was a document. But again, we had this national curriculum framework coming out in 2005. So that was a document called Habitat and Learning, a position paper, focus group position paper, which discussed thoroughly on environmental education, or Habitat and Learning, which was named as Habitat and Learning. Otherwise, it was all about environmental education. So how environmental education should be taught, and all those were discussed in length. So ultimately, there were different points that came up in the document during the framing of the document. So it says that the main focus of environmental education should be to expose students to real life world, natural and social, in which they live, to enable them to analyze, you know, evaluate and draw inferences about problems and concerns related to the environment, to understand the environmental issues, and to promote positive environmental actions in order to facilitate the move towards sustainable development. As you all know, if you don't have a strong environmental education, then your sustainable development is not going to be possible. In order to achieve sustainability, then you really need to have a strong environmental education course, you know. So these were some of the highlights of the Habitat and Learning or the environmental education document that was prepared during the National Curriculum Framework development of that document in 2005. Then again, there are a few points which very important points which the National Curriculum Framework pointed out. So what environmental education should be? It should be learning about the environment. It should be learning through the environment, and it should be learning for the environment. So these were some of the three very important points. So learning about the environment, that means what it is, you know, the what part, which we are pretty much doing that. Learning through the environment is something that we are not practicing very much because we don't really use the environment to teach. So we don't learn environment through the environment. We are doing it theoretically in the classroom within the four walls. Learning for the environment is also something that's missing drastically badly, because when we say learning for the environment, that means that you are going to do something for the environment. So action part is really missing. So out of these 3 points, our focus has pretty much been about learning about the environment only. That means our focus has been more on the knowledge component. So, but ultimately what the NCF, during the meeting of that National Curriculum Framework 2005, it was decided that even if we teach environmental education through different subjects, we will be still able to achieve the objectives and goals that we have planned. So ultimately what we did was, what happened was, based on that decision, and we went back to the Honorable Supreme Court saying that the experts discussed deliberately on how to implement environmental education. We have come up with a suggestion that if we implement it through different subject disciplines, then the goals of or objective of teaching environmental education as a separate subject will be equally achieved. So we took that to the Honorable Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, okay, we have no problem as long as the petitioner, that is Sri MC Mehta and his team, agrees. So it was sorted out. So it was resolved, and it was finally agreed that we are not going to have a separate environmental education as a subject, but we are going to teach environmental education through different disciplines. That means in science, math, social science, language, and everything else. So what right now, what's the status? For example, in class 1 and 2, we are teaching through, we don't have a subject, as I said, but in class 3 to 5, we have something called environmental studies, which includes science and social science component. Then from class 6 to 10, we teach it through different subjects. So all environmental concerns and concepts are included in different disciplines, different subjects. Then in class 11 and 12, a project-based syllabus is suggested, has been proposed. Unfortunately, this is still to be implemented in various states. So this is the current status of how we are implementing environmental education in different schools throughout the country. So what are the major initiatives NCERT has done? We have been doing some in-service training programs. We have developed some resource materials, for example, the project books and things like that, teacher's handbook. So I'll not really get into that. You can go back. As I said, we'll spare more time for the discussions and answering to your questions. So when we talk about environmental education, I always try to, highlight what other organizations are doing. NCERT alone cannot do anything. So there are many other organizations which are also contributing a lot in the field of environmental education. Some of those are like Center for Environmental Education, Ahmedabad, which they have offices in different parts of the country also. WWF India is one of those. The Energy and Resource Institute also have their environmental education wing, where different activities related to environmental education are being done in different schools. You also have the Center for Science and Environment. There's several other organizations which are doing in different capacities, but of course they are contributing in the field of environmental education. So those are some I just mentioned, so you can add many more. Coming back to the situation, since we have talked about India, now let me give you a glimpse of what's, we cannot really talk about environmental education of India and US in 1 hour. That's just not possible. So I'm just giving you a glimpse of everything that's happening so that it will be a food for thought for you all. So if I would say, yeah, environmental education in US is like, it's outdoor education. Environmental education itself started as an outdoor education in the initial years, like in the 40s, 50s. Eventually, it became environmental education. So this practice of outdoor education is still very popular in the US. That means that they do a lot of outdoor activities. Concept of school forest is something very interesting. So every county has this forest, where students are taken in different classes, from students from different classes are taken to that forest at least once in one academic year. So that is something compulsory almost throughout the country. And they do take students there, and students do different kinds of activities. They have a curriculum for that, some very formal curriculum. One day students are going to spend there, what they're going to learn spending there in the forest. So that's something that it's a unique experience that they're going to give. You might think that, okay, one day in a forest, how does it, how is it's going to make a difference? One of my friends, one of my colleague, she interviewed many people, and she found out that, one of her studies, she found out that people who had attended this experience, now that they are in the 60s and 70s, they still remember and still very motivated. That they said that that had really influenced them, in their future life. So one day experience, if you give them a real good experience, that's going to make a difference in the lives of the students. So that's something that they do. Camps are very popular in the US. That means that students, at some point, they go to camps, learn about environment, live with people, live with their friends from different schools or from the same schools. And so camps are something that's very popular, which is not so much in India. We do have some camps coming up. For example, Center for Environment Education in Ahmedabad, they do organize camps in the middle of Ahmedabad city. They have this place for camps. There are some places somewhere in close to Gurgaon. So I think WWF or CEE, Center for Environment Education, they also have some camps. I mean, some places set up, I think. Then there are nature centers. These are places where students or even public, they go and learn few things about environment. So these are more outdoor based activities, and these are still very much popular in the US. So let me show you some of those. So this is one of those school forests. So this is where students, where after they come, they can start chatting. Their teachers can give instructions. Then there are other places where they can do different activities. So something like this is there in different counties in the US. This is one of the, that was in Wisconsin. This is in Florida. So this is a Camp Crystal. So Lake Camp Crystal. So one of those camps where you can see there, it's just very few students, but then how much enthusiastic the teachers are, and even the people who are running this camp. So students come in and learn different things, about, right now they were learning about different ecosystem. You can see the young kids out there. Museums in India, big things are popular. We have big museums, we have big zoos and all those things, but you can teach kids in so many ways in these small museums. You can set up your own museum and start teaching your kids even from the young age. So it's not about the size, but it's about what you teach. So these are very popular out there. Again, not big things, but in a smaller scale, but very effective. This one of those schools. This is in Indiana. So they were learning about, Indiana happens to be, that place happens to be during the ice age, how the ice retreated. So what happened to the rocks and stones and all those things. So students were studying about that. These were very young kids, elementary kids, I think maybe around 5, 6th grade students. This is one of those, what happens when water flows, how rivers are formed, what happened to the rocks, how do they, and all those things. So they are learning those things practically. This is one of those places, the camps, the places where students live in those camps. So some part of the camp, nature centers. This is in Wisconsin again. So they have all kinds of equipment set up in all those camps and nature centers. Again, one night walk are organized in different places where parents and kids, they come out and learn about different animals, for example, owls and all. So there are many outdoor activities, interesting activities that happens not in a large scale, as I said, again, small scale in small towns. but very effective. They involve the parents, kids, teachers, everybody is involved in the community, So that's something that's happening. So let us come to, since we don't have so much time, I'll just run you through this. So what's happening in higher education in India, environmental education? As I said, you have this subject called environmental studies, which is a compulsory, it's a mandatory course for students, college students, as you all must have had this course. What about the challenges? So I'm just pointing out some of the challenges for schools. What are the challenges? I would feel that, I don't know if you agree with me, it has never been a priority. It's never been a priority. For example, we might want to teach our students more about, all those physics concepts, difficult concepts, so-called difficult concepts, or the chemistry, the difficult ones. When it comes to environment, teachers tend to be like, oh, this you can study it by yourself, you can study it at home. So we have this attitude, it's not prioritized at all. We don't discuss about the issues related to environment. It's not that we don't have topics in the curriculum. We have all kinds of topics, but we are not just talking about it in the classroom. We're not giving enough time to discuss about it with the students. Disciplinary approach is something, because when you talk about environment, it can never be disciplinary. You can have to talk in an interdisciplinary way. You have to include uh, the science aspect, social science aspect, economic, everything has to be incorporated in that. And so since we have this subject science, we teach, now it's a science subject, this class is for science, this class is for social science, this class is for maths, this class is for language. So then how do you teach about environment in an interdisciplinary manner? So it is a drawback having these disciplines, these subjects is a drawback to teach environmental education, environmental issues in general. So that's something, a challenge. So a teacher has to be really, interested, or has to be committed to talk about those things. Unless teachers takes an extra step to teach about environmental issues in an interdisciplinary manner, the students are never going to get it. So they're just going to get it in bits and pieces, and that's not going to work. Something that's very important is pre-service training, because we are not training our teachers enough in the field of environmental education. So there is nothing like, it's not compulsory for pre-service teachers. B.Ed courses, they are not, it's not said that all B.Ed course will include how to teach environmental education. Because as I've shown you, it takes a lot of, those different aspects. It doesn't come naturally. When you say that you're going to teach a topic on environment, you just don't go and talk about the concept and finish. There's so many aspects. As I said, you want to make them aware, you want to change their attitude, you want to give them the right skills, the right attitudes, the right approach, the right opportunity to participate. There are different aspects. You want to focus on the behavior. How do you do that? So it takes a lot of practice, it takes a lot of investment in order to do justice to teach environmental education in a meaningful way, effective way. But that, unfortunately, is not happening as of now in the pre-service courses, and because of which teachers are not trained, that means that they will not be able to bring that in their classroom. So that's something. In-service trainings are not happening much for environmental education to make up what they have not learned in the pre-service courses, or even that is not being made up in the in-service courses. Again, you have in-service courses or in-service training programs for disciplines. So when do you include this aspect of environmental education? So that's a real challenge. Again, for even similarly for higher education, I would say that it's not priority. How many students took those environmental studies course seriously? Or even the teachers, how many of us were taking those courses seriously or teaching those courses seriously? I doubt, I really doubt. One of my writing, I mentioned about this strongly, where I said where things were wrong. So you might Google that out and see what I wrote about what's the issues in environmental education. Untrained teachers, we take it for granted that anybody can teach environmental issues. So if it's a bio person, it's a zoology person or a botany person, that person will be able to teach environmental education. That's not so. As I showed you, it's a very specialized area. You really need to be trained in order to do justice to the field. So that's not happening. So in all of this, I think the major problems, the major challenges are these points. And see, this is again a statistics, which is an old statistics, but still then 10 years old, but still then the number of students that we are supposed to be covering, So how do you even train all of these students so that they are environmentally aware, they have the right attitude, they have the right skill, they have the right opportunity to participate in taking action. So it's going to take a lot of effort for everybody in the system. Let me just bring out what NEP, National Education Policy, says about 2020, because from now on, what we do for environmental education is going to be decided pretty much by this document. So it highlights a point on focusing on goal 4, that is about quality education. It recognizes the severity of environmental problems, and so that's something good. So now that we might focus more on all this climate change and all kinds of problems that we're facing, environmental awareness, including water and resources, it will be taught. The point, the last word, taught. This is very important. So that means that a strong emphasis is being given in this policy document. Let's see how far it goes. It also talks about introduction of contemporary subject, which includes environmental education again. So it needs to be, it will be decided by the experts or by the people who are going to frame the curriculum framework, and ultimately who are going to write the textbooks and all that. Whether, how do we teach again? Ultimately, what we're going to do is we're going to come back to the goals and objectives again. Whether you teach in a different subject, separate subject, or through different subjects, whatever it is, it's all about it. It's all going to be about how well you train your teachers to do that. So again, it also talks about knowledge of India, which is very important because traditional knowledge, it's so related with taking care of the environment, because many of the traditional practices are very environment friendly. So we want to bring those aspects in the in the curriculum now. Also, NEP also talks about, NEP 2020 also talks about students will be taught about doing what's, ethical aspects, which is so important. Again, when you talk about environmental education or environmental issues, you cannot talk without talking about the ethics, because it's all about ethics. So that's something that's has been highlighted in the NEP 2020. That's good. Hopefully that will be reflected in the curriculum. 2 points. This is very important. So it talks about now B.Ed programs will include, now that it has talked about clearly that B.Ed programs will talk about environmental awareness and sensitivity and conservation, all those points, and also the fundamental duties, Article 51A, which I shared in the earlier slides. So these 2 points are so important because it might change the course in B.Ed programs. And if the way teachers are trained changes, the way they teach is going to change. So hopefully I'm very positive about this following this NEP 2020. So that's something very good about it. So we have to wait and watch and see what happens, what we do about all these recommendations of NEP 2020. So way forward, what do we do now? So I would say that first of all, we need to understand the difference between environmental science and environmental education, because everybody assumes that, okay, if you know the science, then environmental education is done. It's not, because environmental science is just about the science. You don't really have to talk about, you don't have to. But when you say environmental education, then it incorporates environmental science as well as other aspects, for example, the awareness, the attitudes, the skills, the behavior, and all those things, So it's much broader. So we need to really understand the difference between this, setting clear goals and objectives in the curriculum. What do we really want to achieve? Emphasis on critical thinking, decision making, and problem solving. So there's just very broad points that I brought out. Otherwise, we can keep on breaking down these points and we can talk for hours. So I would just leave it at that. Teacher preparation is like, the more you say, it's like it's less. I mean, you can keep on talking about it, how important it is to have a strong environmental education programs for in the B.Ed courses or any other teacher preparation courses. So that's about, and again, not just the teachers, but the other stakeholders, for example, the administrators, the principals, the people who are involved in the school administration, the education department. So all have to work together so that we are able to implement environmental education in a meaningful way. So it involves the participation of everybody, even parents, even community people have to value this discipline or area called environmental education. Then only it will be valued in the schools, in the teaching learning process. So things might change then and then only. So I leave it at that. So let me take some questions. I think we have some